Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the KTBS podcast production, a political podcast called The App. And as I say every time we do one of these, the app has nothing to do with computers. The app in this case stands for ArkLaTex People and Politics, the app. So we've had a lot of terrific guests on this podcast, starting with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. We add to that lineup again today. We want to welcome in our guest today, State Representative Jack McFarland. He represents District 13, and Jack is also the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Jack, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, look, you're one of the guys I really look forward to talking with and interviewing when we come down to Baton Rouge, which we'll be doing again here in a couple of weeks with the start of a brand new session. But to get things, before we start looking forward, let's look back just a few days. We're just about a week removed from an election. There was 4 constitutional amendments on that ballot, and they all 4 went down to pretty resounding defeat. How does that frame what the legislature does moving forward?
Well, Jeff, it would have been wonderful if they would have all passed. Obviously, since they did not, we have some significant challenges. In the budget, we already had a $194 million shortfall for the fiscal year 25-26. In that constitutional amendment, had it passed, that would have helped our future, this year and future years, as far as shortfalls. And so it's just made some budget challenges. The governor's executive budget, as it was presented in February, was based on the last revenue estimated forecast, and that demonstrates a $194 million shortfall, and that is the budget I have to work with now. There are other requests and other needs that have been asked to be included in the future budget, but until additional revenue is recognized, we know what we have, and it is $194 million short. So, and that,
does that include, when you say the shortfall, does that include the teacher raise thing, or is that a whole separate item?
No, that's a whole separate item. If we add the additional teacher stipend that has been added the last 3 years, that's another $198 million that we have to find, which creates another challenge. The budget that was presented, the governor had already addressed the $194 million shortfall, but for me now to find the additional $198 million to backfill the teacher stipend, it's going to mean that I have to reduce other areas of the budget, regardless of whether it's education, healthcare, public safety, whatever it is, there will be reductions in other parts of the budget. Now, as chairman of appropriations, I'm challenged with finding the priorities of all the legislature, but specifically within the Committee of Appropriations. So it'll be a challenge, but it's one that we're up to. And look, I'm optimistic that we will always find a way to meet the constitutional requirement to balance our budget before the session ends.
Was the failure of Amendment 2 that would have given the legislature a little more freedom, I guess, in ways they can move money in places where they could cut. Now, right now, I guess the legislature, you guys, you're still limited to cutting. The main cuts would be in, like you said, healthcare and education, right?
That's right. Within that constitutional amendment, we would have been opening up what we call Article 7, which would have been giving us more flexibility about where reductions in the budget could come from. But, you know, I can't operate and craft a budget under that surmise. So now I'm back to addressing the budget the way it's historically been addressed. Yeah. There are a few places within state agencies that do receive state general fund dollars, but those are often critical dollars as well. So it does make it challenging, but you know, look, we're going to get in there. We've been working on it. But look, Jeff, this just didn't start. In the fall, we had budget hearings, something that's never happened before. And the reason we did that was because then we had already foreseen, based on revenue estimated forecast, that there would be budget shortfalls for the next 4 years. The most challenging shortfall is not this year and not next year. It is 3 years from now when we have over a $500 million shortfall, $568 million to be exact. So we began having the budget hearings in the fall to ask agencies to start looking for places within their own budgets that they can voluntarily make reductions. Now, in addition to that, the governor created a fiscal responsibility program, which I was appointed to as chairman of appropriations. And we are working with the individual that he has appointed to serve as chairman of that. His name is Steve Orlando.
Yep.
And we're working with him to find other efficiencies within government, state government, much like what you see happening on the federal level.
So that's the Louisiana version of Doge. Has there been any negative reaction to the Louisiana Doge like there has been on the national level?
No, not thus far. We've been working on some things. We've recognized that we do have challenges within our state government and within our agencies, and it takes a lot of cooperation to get into someone's budget. Not often do the agencies really want to share all that information. And you feel like you got Big Brother looking over your shoulder.
Right.
But that's what our job is, and we're going to work hard to find those efficiencies within government. Some agencies have done it very well already for us, and I'll give you an example. The Department of Energy and Natural Resources, they reduced their budget voluntarily by 10%. So, look, it makes our job easier when you have agencies that do that. Unfortunately for us, DENR does not utilize a lot of state general fund dollars. So a reduction of 10% in DNR, it doesn't amount to a lot of money, just a couple $1 million. But look, if every agency and every department begins to do this, then I think we'll be in a much better position.
How much of a priority will it become? I guess if it will become a priority, I struggle with the teacher pay raise thing, and a lot of people have been asking about that over the past week, because it seems like the teachers and unions groups or whatever rallied against Amendment 2. They voted in large part, I guess, against it, and yet they still want their raises. And somehow that just doesn't compute in my brain. Is there going to be a way to figure? And teacher, don't get me wrong, I'm married to a teacher. Teachers deserve everything they can get, but is there going to be a way to satisfy that? I guess, and keep that stipend going that is now not constitutionally guaranteed.
Yeah. So, Jeff, let me start off by saying, look, our education system now, for the first time, has begun to rise through the ranks nationally. We're ranked 32nd now, in anticipation that we could be ranked even higher. So our teachers are doing a good job. We've asked a lot of them. We've tried to streamline some of the things that we require of them. We've tried to reduce the number of testing and other things that we were asking. There's been a lot of legislation passed over the last 3 or 4 decades that just was requiring, I think, a lot of unnecessary things of our teachers. So our first effort was to reduce the amount of work they had. I know that doesn't account and compute to a pay raise, but we wanted to lessen that burden of feeling, once again, like we're looking over their shoulder, and the accountability part of it. We still want them to be accountable, but we just had to work with them on that. Secondly, Jeff, the amendment, that I think that there was a lot of misinformation out there. I read some of it and I couldn't dispel all of it. I just didn't have that large of an audience. For an example, I read several times that we were raiding the teacher's retirement account. That was absolutely not true.
Right.
That's completely false. We were not raiding the retirement account, and we were actually trying to pay off debt that the retirement account owed. Now, yes, we were using the Education Excellence Trust Fund to do that, but we were going to save the teachers' retirement account $1 billion in interest. And that's where the savings was going to come from to create the reoccurring dollars
Yeah.
to give the teachers their pay raise. Now, we do recognize, and we knew from the beginning that there were going to be districts that could not fully pay the teachers' pay raise at 2,000 and 1,000,
Yeah.
1,000 being the support staff,
Right.
based on paying off that debt. So we knew that an additional 40 to 60 million dollars was going to be required to backfill that. And we were perfectly comfortable and confident that that would not be an issue for us. Those were things I was already working on within the budget to account for. But once again, I mean, look, I think there was a lot of misinformation out there,
Yeah.
and we got to do a better job of getting out there and explaining it and meeting with our teachers and their organizations. And look, we're fixing to go into a fiscal session. I do
Right.
believe that a lot of these things will come back up in the fiscal session, and that we will put together another proposal that we will put before the voters and the teachers as a way to establish reoccurring dollars. See, that's been the problem the entire time, Jeff, is that we've never had the reoccurring dollars to sustain the teacher's pay raise. Instead, we've
Yeah.
been given this teacher stipend,
Right.
and we've always, our goal was to give them 2,000 and 1,000, which for me equals 198 million when it's all totaled.
Right.
But to do that forever, you have to have a permanent source. And so, look, it's disappointing, but it's a democratic process, and I respect the process. I was elected to come down here and bring ideas forth, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back to Baton Rouge, and we're going to work together, and we're going to come up with another proposal or some multitude of ideas and present them to not just the public to vote on, but also to the teachers.
So, as the head of the Appropriations Committee in the House, you get everybody's requests, right? They all come through you. So, like, you're the money man. You make it rain, right? I mean, that's got to get pretty tense at times, I would think, Jack.
It does, Jeff. I accepted this responsibility when I was appointed as chairman of appropriations. I've had the privilege of serving on appropriations, now going into my third term for 10 years, which gives me a great background of knowledge, in-depth knowledge of the appropriations process and where dollars can be found and where we can redirect other dollars.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, every group, every agency, everyone comes asking for dollars. And look, we've tried to have a standstill budget this year. Last year was the first year that we actually slowed the growth of government to less than 2%. And historically, it's been growing by 10 and 12%. So look, I think we're headed in the right direction. My goal, once again, is to have a standstill budget or less. But it does become a little overwhelming at times.
I bet.
Because I don't like to tell anyone no, but I'm forced to. More especially when I think about our disabled community, our children, and our senior citizens. We have a responsibility to those individuals to provide them with quality health care and a quality education and just an environment where they can thrive. So it is difficult when I meet with those individuals and I can't deliver the resources that they're asking for. And
Yeah.
often it's additional resources that they want. Now, look, Jeff, there's one other problem we have. The federal government is now making reductions within its budget. And I'm just beginning to get notice of one or two things that they're doing that, which creates another problem for the state, because as they reduce their federal awards to the state, then some of these programs are going to be impacted by those federal dollars being reduced. And we don't have the state dollars to backfill all those programs.
Wow.
Now, look, nor do I think we should try to backfill all of them, but I think that some of them are worthy of being funded. So the challenge is going to be even twofold now with the reductions being made on the federal level.
So you've had all this wonderful on-the-job experience, so to speak, learning how to deal with money and where dollars come from and where they can flow to and what you can't. You might be using this. If you don't want to talk about this, let me know. But this might be great experience for a future political run for you, right? You want to tell folks about that?
Absolutely. I've been encouraged that in the next election cycle to pursue the office of State Treasurer. It's a natural progression for someone like myself who has served on appropriations and more specifically as chairman of appropriations. The reason that is because the legislature appropriates the dollars and the treasurer makes sure that those dollars are spent according to the will of the body. His job is to manage the state's dollars as has been appropriated by the legislature. So I think it puts me in a perfect position. And so far, I appreciate the encouragement from many. That election is a couple years away. Right. But if we can get through this tough process, then I see no reason why I wouldn't be more than qualified to advance into a position as treasurer.
Well, of course, John Fleming is currently the state treasurer. He's made it clear that he's going to run for the United States Senate. He'll try to unseat Cassidy, Senator Bill Cassidy. So does that make, are you in either way, or is just if Fleming wins the Senate seat?
Well, once I started this process, I started it because I was encouraged to. But secondly, once I seen Treasurer John Fleming seeking the U.S. Senate race, then obviously it would lead me to believe that that is a office of position that he would rather hold than the state treasurer. So I think that regardless, in 2 years, that I would still seek the election of state treasurer.
All right. Well, we wish you a lot of luck in that. Let's backtrack to the budget. We talked about every year since I've been going down to Baton Rouge now, and not last year so much, but every other year, every other session, it's feel like arriving at a budget that everybody can agree on comes down to maybe the last few minutes of the session. It's crazy to me. I mean, it's you've had all this time to negotiate and talk and try to do things, and it comes down to the last, 10, 15 minutes, and everybody's, all tense and yelling at each other and everything before things finally get settled. Would you anticipate that happening again this year?
No, I don't. So last year we were able to get in front of that, and we did that through communication. And if you remember, for the first time ever, we had a unanimous vote on House Bill 1, which is our budget bill. And look, I think that what led to that is just being open with everyone. We had discussions with everyone openly in committee and on the floor. And excuse me, I think that put us in a position to unify and get behind a budget that funded the needs of the state of Louisiana. And this year, if you'll recall, back in the fall, there was a constitutional amendment passed so that it prevents these real quick or rushed budgets from being passed before people have an opportunity to read and understand them. The requirement now in the Constitution, voted on by the people, says that we have to give the body 48 hours to review the budget, HB 1, before we can take a vote and pass it. And look, I fully supported that constitutional amendment because I'm one of those that fell victim to having a rushed budget, and you don't really always know what may have been added that you would not have supported otherwise. So I think it's an injustice to the people of Louisiana. and to most specifically to my constituents for me to vote for something if I don't know what's in it.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. One of the things Governor Landry, I don't know if this is in reaction to the failure of Amendment 2, I guess it probably is. He just announced this past week a hiring freeze for the state, for state government. And I guess the goal, he said, was to save $20 million every year based on what happened last Saturday. I just wonder if you had any comments on that hiring freeze.
Look, I think that happens under and can happen under any executive department. Governor Landry, I don't want to speak for him, but as chairman of appropriations, we were already going to be tasked with looking at funded vacancies. That's what we call them in our budgeting process. So a hiring freeze was expected. It is a way to immediately save $20 million. Now, critical employees will still be open. The administration, division of administration could ultimately, change that and add critical employees. But for the most part, the hiring freeze I expected, especially after the failure of the constitutional amendment.
Okay. Well, you said this is a fiscal session. In a fiscal session, each lawmaker can bring only 5 bills, I guess, that are not fiscal bills. What type of bills might you be presenting, if any, this coming session?
Well, ironically, I believe all but maybe one of my bills is fiscally related. I am going to be bringing 2 or 3 pieces of legislation that are actually cleaning up previous pieces of legislation passed that are fiscally related. One has to, I have to address some rules and regulations that were installed or put in place a couple years ago as it relates to qualified adoption care centers. There was a tax credit that was created to encourage investment in these facilities. But the way the rules and regulations were written, it was onerous and no one could take advantage of that. So we're going to re-outline those rules and regulations in that piece of legislation. But one piece of legislation I am running is to recognize an individual who made the ultimate sacrifice for us as citizens of the United States, Clayton Horn. He was a soldier, gave his life, and to recognize him, we're going to have a memorial in Wynn Parish, a bridge. We're going to name the bridge after him. It is where his family was gathered and the citizens when we brought him home. And so that is one that is touching. And look, those are the ones that are special to me because those are the ones that are lasting and, have such an impact in individuals' lives.
Absolutely, and kudos for doing that. I think that's terrific. What, all the time you spend in the legislature, any particular piece of legislation, you mentioned one that you thought was onerous, any particular pieces of legislation there were big battles over that stick in your mind?
Oh, look, insurance, which is such a big issue right now. I think that's going to play a significant part of this session. I'm a business owner, own several trucks, and I'm feeling that just like every other constituent and citizen is. We have got to get that right. We did do some good things last year, passed some legislation. One of those pieces that you're asking about was a direct action piece where basically all it does is says that you can't give the jury notice that I have insurance or who my insurance company is. So they have to operate and make their decisions without the knowledge that, as a defendant, that I have insurance. Now, I was proud of that because I had tried to pass that legislation multiple times. But those are things that when you spend 4 or 5 years trying to pass a piece of legislation, and then finally it culminates, it makes it all worth it. But more especially, I know after it's only been in effect for a year now, it is making a difference. as are many other pieces we passed last year. But we got to do more. We owe it to our citizens. And look, just as individuals and business owners, these high insurance rates have just really gotten out of control. But we also need to hold the insurance companies accountable. I have a lot of constituents that say, look, I see these insurance companies reporting record profits. That makes it very challenging. We can't just always blame one side or the other. Everyone needs to come to the table and be ready to identify the changes that we need to make within our insurance market to right this ship.
Jack, has there ever been a time when these trial attorneys would come to the table and say, here's what we can do to help fix it? I don't think that's happened, has it?
No, but we are having those conversations with them now. And I was privileged to sit down and have that conversation with some just this week and sit in on a meeting. I wasn't there for that. I was there for the budget, but I was able to sit in on that meeting. And, look, they are even saying that, hey, look, some of the things that you're doing are we've seen less lawsuits in 24-25 than we did in 23-24. Look, I think there's a multitude of things that, according to them, are leading to this. Obviously, some of the legislation that we passed. But look, we're manufacturing cars and trucks today, even commercial vehicles, that with technology has made them safer. And it's not just the airbags and the restraints. It is also the side markers in your mirrors, preventing you from moving from lane to lane without, feeling your seat vibrating.
Yeah.
The automatic braking, so that you don't have those near as many of those rear end collisions as we were, because it basically forces you to stop. And even in the commercial side, the technology for the anti-rollover, and it even has anti-braking now. These things cost more. So, insurance will tell you, look, this is driving up the cost when we have to repair one of these vehicles. But at the same time, it is preventing a lot of accidents, which ultimately prevents it does help with the decline of lawsuits.
Yeah, well, that's all good stuff. Listen, we're down to a final minute or two here as we head into this upcoming session. What would you leave as a final message for folks that are watching or listening to this podcast about the upcoming session?
Look, we were elected to do many things. Most importantly is to represent our constituents. Sometimes the decisions I make seem often challenging, but I'm going to always do what best represents the individuals that elected me in District 13. For this year, I think that we have to address the insurance market. I think we're back having to address that for sure. In this budget, with the constitutional amendment failing, I think that we have to get a budget that does address the needs of the state. We can do that while working on the teacher stipend. But when we come out of this fiscal session, because it is a fiscal year, we need to once again have more proposals put together to put forth to the public. And we need to do a better job of getting out there and answering the questions that our constituents have when we ask them to come to the ballot and vote on constitutional amendments. So I'm making that commitment today, Jeff, that whatever we put forth, I want to make myself as available as I can, not just to District 13, but to anywhere in the state to answer those questions. After all, I am responsible, and it is my piece of legislation, my bill, that will have the budget in it. So I'm open at any time to meeting with anyone to address or discuss any proposal that we make.
All right, that is great stuff. Jack McFarland, State Representative Jack McFarland from District 13, Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. He's one of the good guys. Jack, thanks for being with us today. We certainly do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. You're too kind.
Well deserved. You've been watching The App, ArkLaTex People and Politics. You can get it wherever you get your podcast and on all KTBS digital channels. Thanks for watching and have a good one, everybody.